Glad you're here. We got some new people. We're missing some of the older ones. All right. So again, just for the people watching, we're going to be doing some stuff on the board, and I can't show it to you live, so you'll have to go to the YouTube to follow along what we did on the board tonight. And again, it's the disadvantage of not being here. So, no excuse if you're in London or something like that. All right, I think we were in the doctor's opinion, right? And for those of you that this is your first night here, there are 2 weeks that you can watch on YouTube and catch up. And just go to Danny Falcone and Danny with 3 N's, and you'll pull up the page on YouTube. That's not how you spell my name, that's just how Scott spells my name. Okay. So we're on page, doctor's opinion, we're on the, my book is different than yours, so I'm going to say we're on 1, 2, 3, the 4th page of the doctor's opinion.
Are we on XXX?
Probably in your book it's different than mine.
That's B3.
So it's the 4th page of the doctor's opinion. And I think we did the first paragraph last week, right? We went over that last week. So now we're on, and you know, when we ask somebody to study the book, we suggest the best way to study the book is to read the paragraphs, stop and think about what you're going to write your questions down in the book, and then reread the 2 paragraphs and see if there's anything you missed, right? And so this is one of the places that I come on in, Mike. We're in the doctor's opinion on the 4th page of the doctor's opinion. In the 2nd paragraph. And this is one that I always, it's easy to check to see if they really been studying the book, because the first sentence says, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. That may sound a little archaic in its writing, but, you know, most people that are new and they read this for the first time really don't understand that. What does that mean? Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. So it's like, have you ever been to like Starbucks or something and ordered a cappuccino? Do you know how they make a cappuccino? They take milk and they put it on the steamer and they steam it. It gets hot and steamy and then it becomes frothy, right? So frothy emotional appeal is your wife or your husband or your mom or your dad or somebody trying to appeal to your better senses. You know, you're better than that. Stop doing that. Look what you're doing to the kids. Look what you're doing to yourself. We love you. Don't go out. Stay home. You know, that kind of stuff. Frothy emotional appeal. And the book said that seldom works. That hardly works. Every once in a while we might try to be magnanimous and say, okay, I'll stay home and we're just a miserable company for the night, you know, because we want to be elsewhere doing something else, you know. So, but it's very true. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Come on in, guys. Dad. All right, so, and then what he's really doing here is he's setting us up for the important part, which is coming next in the same paragraph. It says, the message that can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. So in other words, and over again in our literature, they talk about one alcoholic helping another alcoholic. Okay, and that's until you hear somebody sharing your story, until you begin to relate, you can't really begin to recover. You have to relate first, because otherwise, you know, we suffer from a severe case of uniqueness besides alcoholism. You know, we don't think that we're so different and nobody feels like I feel. Nobody's been what I've been through. Nobody's feeling what I'm feeling. So when you first hear somebody sharing something that, oh, I did that. That was me. And you begin to relate, you can then really begin to recover. And that's why the message that can hold and interest these people must have depth and weight. It's got to come from somebody like us. Okay? Even though there's lots of good-hearted people in all these treatment centers and places that really want to help us, they can't reach us. And the doctor writes about that, and the doctor's opinion, that they really can't do anything for us. So it's an important, and the next paragraph, the doctor talks about that. Skip down a little bit, it says, we feel after many years of experience, we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. Now, here's that word again, altruistic. Some of you last week raised your hand, said you didn't know what it was, and I said to go home and get the dictionary out. Let's see if you really did that. Raise your hand if you didn't know last week, and you raised your hand last week what that word meant. Oh, now nobody's raising their hand. Okay. So did you look up the word?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the definition of altruistic?
The belief or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others.
You belong sitting up front. I like that. Yeah. So it comes from the word altruism, right? And in the, I believe the first time we read it, again, I don't have the same page as you, but 2 pages back, on the bottom of the page, it says, though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is jittery or befogged. And then it described what it is. Altruistic is doing something for somebody without looking for any reward, really in a nutshell.
Do you really think that it's, in this program, that it's altruistic? Because we can't keep it unless we give it away. So I kind of think that we're kind of selfish in that sense. Does that make sense?
Well, and that's a lot of 12-step bullshit when we talk about it's a selfish program. It's a selfless program.
Right.
It's not a selfish program. It's a selfless program. So, but just think about it for a second, right? Why do I do this? Why have I been doing this for 26 years every week? Why do I work with other people? Why do I do those things? It ain't because I'm a nice guy.
Because it keeps you sober.
It's just part of what this program tells me I need to do, right?
Gratitude in action.
Okay, but call it what you want, isn't it? An altruistic action,
Yes.
isn't it? You know, giving up my time. I mean, there's probably a good movie on right now, you know. It's doing what you have to do, helping others, and not really, and that's how we give it away. That's how we pass it on. So yes, absolutely. You know, there's nothing in this book that's not true. So if you believe something not true in this book, it's good to study it some more because you really don't understand what they're saying. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go down to the bottom paragraph now. It says, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Does anybody not agree with that? After everything I just said, right? So men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. What if you come from a home where it's totally dysfunctional and you're getting abused, and the only, you know, what about a situation like that? Because over here it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced. What about that? Is this a true statement?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what about the person that's drinking because they're having a horrendous life at home?
They're still looking for an effect.
Huh?
They're still looking for an effect.
Well, they're looking for something, and the effect is that they get out of reality, right? Reality sucks, and this takes them, you know, take some drinks and they get out of reality. So no matter what your circumstances, that's a very true statement. We initially a drink because we like the effect. For me, the guys on the corner in my neighborhood were the cool guys in my neighborhood, and I wanted to be part of that. You know, they had the leather jackets and the hair slicked back, and the cigarette hanging out of their mouth, and their big garbage pail on fire, and they were just saying, and they were cool. And I wanted to be cool like them, so they were drinking. So the effect was, in my mind anyway, if I go there and drink with them, I'm cool like they are. Yeah. So men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol, right? The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. So, and by the way, I write things on this board that are not important. I just, a little saying every week I'll put on here that I like. You don't have to write them down. But, so here's what I want to do. I want to try to explain this because so many people read this paragraph and don't really fully understand it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a scale, okay? And so here's the scale, okay? And again, I'm sorry, you guys, but maybe you can see it real quick. How about that? Go watch YouTube, you'll see the board. So here's the scale. Now, it doesn't matter where you come from and what your life is like. You can come from, you know, a mansion with maids and servants, or you can come from the ghetto. You know, we say in in AA we say Yale or jail. You know, Penn State or the state pen. It don't matter where you come from, right? It's because we all begin at what's normal for us. So this scale, in the middle of the scale, the N is normal. Whatever's going on in your life, you could be getting abused on a daily basis, verbally, sexually, physically, or you can come from an Ozzie and Harriet family. For those of you that are young, you don't understand that. But it's a really nice, perfect family kind of thing. So, but the point is, it doesn't matter. Your normal is your normal. And then what happens when we begin to drink or use drugs is, like the first time you drink or you use some drugs, we go from a normal feeling to, that E stands for euphoria. Okay? So we go from a normal feeling to a feeling of a euphoric feeling. I feel great, right? That's what happens. We take a drink, we take a drug, we were normal, and see what happens for us is eventually, as we continue on, things that weren't normal before, you would never think. When I was a kid and I started drinking, I'd come home, my mom would say, "Were you drinking?" I said, "Somebody spilled some beer on me," you know. And, you know, and not even a year later, I'm in my room blowing the joint out the window, you know, and drinking. So what was abnormal becomes normal. Does that make sense to you? Hold on, we got knocked off. One second, guys, sorry. That's why. The YouTube is good, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. All right. Trying to go live. Okay. So this is recording, but I don't know if it's live. It is recording. So if you miss it, you're going to have to catch up. Life goes on. Okay. So we go from this normal feeling to this euphoric feeling. Right? Takes us out of where we are and what's happening in our lives. Then we come down, and when we come down, we're normal again. So as we continue on and progress, like I said, what I was doing a year later was something I never would have dreamed I would have done before, you know. And so what happens for us is it's very tricky. That's why they say this is a cunning, baffling, and powerful disease. Because what happens is my norm starts to move. And if this end of the spectrum is euphoric, the other end of the spectrum we're going to call dysphoria. So if this is really great, this really sucks. Right? And what happens is, as my norm starts to change, it doesn't change to the euphoric side. It moves to the dysphoria side. Okay? And what happens is, as I continue to drink and use drugs, I start missing that euphoric feeling. I fall a little short. So maybe I got to change the chemicals or add to it or do more, right? And then when I come down, I'm not normal anymore. I go crashing past normal, right? That was the progression for me. And to make a long story short, by the time I got sober, that was my norm. To them, the alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They're restless, irritable, and discontented. So this is where I wound up. I think I lost everybody online, so. Let me just try one more time. Sorry. Okay. All right. I think we lost them, but it's recorded. So, you understand? That's what he's talking about here. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot after time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So by the time we crawl into these rooms, I don't know about you guys, but everybody in my life drank and did drugs. And if that's not what you were doing, I didn't have no time for you, because that's all I was doing. And some people that may not be true for, but regardless, this is still a true statement what the doctor's talking about. And now he says, they're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks, but they see others taken with impunity. Now he says, after they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do. You notice he says after. He doesn't say if. It's not a question of might it happen to you. After they have succumbed to the desire again. It's going to happen to you. Okay? And he says, and the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with the firm resolution to not to drink again. This is repeated and over. Let's look at that for a minute. So what we're going to do now, this is important. If you don't learn anything tonight, pay attention to what we're going to do now. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make a test tube alcoholic. We're going to create an alcoholic like we're in a laboratory or something here. Just pay. Use your imagination. Don't take off points from my test tube. That's my test tube. So if I want you to think about how you felt on a regular basis right before you got sober. Normal feelings you had the days prior to you getting sober. For me, I was full of anger. What about something else? What else?
Depression.
Okay, let me. Depression.
Fear.
Huh?
Fear.
Fear.
Hopeless.
Anxiety.
Hold on, I don't like that fear. Hopeless.
Shame.
Shame.
Resentment.
I didn't even know I had any of those. Okay, look. For lack of space and time, let's agree on something. If we really wanted to, we could probably fill this wall up with all these negative things of how we felt, right? But now what we need, we're going to make a good alcoholic and a good addict. We need two more things. Alcohol and drugs. Hello? Alcohol and drugs. Right? Now, here's what happens, okay? If you shake this up, what you come out with is you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and you. That's what we come out with, right? Because when we got this stuff going on in our lives, we take some booze or some drugs, and it numbs that feeling, doesn't it? Temporarily. But it temporarily kills that feeling. The problem with that is when it wears off, those feelings come back tenfold. And at the end, for each and every one of us, the vicious cycle is that we can't break, is that it comes back tenfold. So the only thing that works is some more booze or some more alcohol. Right? Now, this is what I want you to pay attention to. Very important. When we come into recovery, this is all we do. Make no mistake about it. We come into recovery and we remove the alcohol and drugs. That's all we do. And now you're left with an angry, depressed, fearful, hopeless, shameful, resentful, blah, blah, blah person. And Bill knew that. That's why he said after they succumb to the desire again. Not if. How long can you walk around full of anger, full of fear, hopeless, depressed, before you do something to medicate that? You get it? So he knew that this is how we're going to feel. All we've done is we've removed the alcohol and the drugs. That's all we've done. Does that make sense? Very important to understand that. So now we're left with this. This is who I am. Okay? And if I don't change that, I'm going to drink again. Because I don't know about you, but I can't last long feeling those things without medication. Does that make sense? So after they have succumbed to the desire again, if you don't do something about it, you will. And he says, they emerge remorseful with the firm resolution not to drink again. I swear to God, I ain't going to do this no more, right? How many times have we said that? This is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So Bill just laid out in this paragraph, he laid out why we started drinking, what happens to us as we continue to drink, and then what happens to us when we stop drinking if we don't do anything and what we're left with. And then he finishes it off by telling us the only thing that's going to help us is a psychic change. Well, that's nice. I can't go to Macy's and get the $29.99 special and buy a psychic change. It doesn't happen like that. And I don't know about you guys, because people run around these rooms trying to find a psychic change, just crazier than a loon trying to find a psychic change. And the directions in this book is what leads you to a psychic change. If you follow the directions in this book, it guarantees you a psychic change. It guarantees to solve your drink problem. How do you like that? It doesn't say maybe. It tells us we have solved the drink problem. And lots of other promises that it gives us. So here we are. Our life is shit. We're hanging our heads against the wall, just going crazy. And here's a place that tells you, hey, if you do what we tell you to do, your life's going to be unbelievable. Beyond your wildest dreams. And what do? Bullshit. You're full of shit. Ain't going to happen. That's our attitude. So, we have to find an entire psychic change. Let's think about that for a minute. There's a couple of important words in there. First of all, it says entire, right? So it's not a little bit of a psychic change. And psychic means what? Huh? Of the mind, right? Psyche of the mind. So we're talking about our thinking. So he's telling us that we have to entirely change the way we think. We have to entirely change the way we think. Well, how the hell you do that? That's what the steps do for us. They teach us how to change who we are. It doesn't happen because I went to 14 meetings this week. It doesn't happen just because I got on my knees and prayed real hard for it to happen. It's a result of taking these steps out of the book and applying them in my life, and then I change. And as we continue in this book, we're going to come across actual personality changes in our life as a result of these steps. Not my words, the book says it. Doesn't say it that way, but what it describes is an actual personality change as a result of these steps. So, if you want to change what's happening in your life, here's the answer for you. Right here. Now, it's important to know also, if you scoot down to about the middle of this page, this is the paragraph that begins with "faced with this problem," and it's the third sentence. It says, one feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. He just told us what we need to change, to overcome this problem that we have, and now he's telling us something more than human power is needed to do that. Let's make no bones about this. We're talking about God. If that offends you, nobody's tying you down here. There's the door. We don't make excuses or apologies for God. You get your own higher power. When we get to step 2, we'll talk about that. But you must get in touch with a power greater than yourself, or it ain't going to work for you. Because he's telling us here, we feel that one feels that something more than human power. So my sponsor can't get me sober. All you people in the room can't get me sober. But you can help guide me. And you guiding me doing the work, and me finding a God in my life, I will get sober. My life will change. I won't be hopeless anymore. Remember what we talked about in the doctor's opinion when we first started, right? Where 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and we talked about that. That we're not really hopeless, but it sure seemed that way. It's a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It's not real. You're not hopeless. If you're new and just starting around here, your life is shit. We understand that. Nobody's life is great and wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll join AA. It doesn't happen like that. We understand your life is shit. But you're not hopeless. We understand it seems that way. It is a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, but it's not real. You need to know that. It's not real. What's real is you are not hopeless. God loves you. People in these rooms will love you. And you can overcome whatever you're suffering from. That's real. But it don't happen just because you come to me. You have to do the work. And he says it right here in that first paragraph on the top of the page. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once the psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems, he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. How about that? I don't know about you guys, but before I got sober, I'm sorry, where are you? I'm on the top of the page. On the other hand, the first paragraph.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
But see what he says here? Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who has so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. That is amazing. That is a miracle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Is that anything short of a miracle? Again, I don't know about you guys, but my truth is this. Before I got sober, I could not go, and I'm not exaggerating, I couldn't go 5 minutes. I couldn't go 5 minutes. Many times I'd sit there and I'd say to myself, I look at the clock, it'd be 10 after 10, I'd say, I'm not going to do nothing till 10:30. I couldn't make 10:15. That's my truth. I could not go 5 minutes. And here, you're telling me, you're promising me, that the very same person, me, who seemed doomed, me, I was doomed, I had so many problems I never thought I could solve them all. Suddenly, I find myself able to control my desire for alcohol. Wow. If that's not powerful enough to keep you here, then I don't think you're done drinking. And he says, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. Oh, I thought we don't have any rules in AA. Who came up with rules? We don't, people like us don't like rules. We don't follow rules too good. What are the rules we're talking about? Steps, huh? Yeah. Because if you study our literature and you look, and just keep this page, but shoot over to how it works for a minute. Now my pages are the same as yours when we get to this part of the book. And in this first paragraph of how it works, a lot of people think that the word rarely was changed from its original content, and that's not true. There is one word that was changed, and that's the word path. Because originally it said, now not in our first edition it said path, but in the original manuscript, Bill wrote, instead of using the word path, he wrote directions. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. So let's make no mistake about it. The steps are a set of directions. They're not a set of suggestions. I know it says something similar to that that confuses people. When we get there, we'll talk about that. But the steps are a set of directions that, if followed as a way of life, you know, it says here in the forward to the 12 and 12. The third paragraph in the forward to 12 and 12 says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. So, when we talk about the steps, we are talking about a set of directions. And no matter how bright or brilliant you may seem to be, you are not going to write a better set of directions than is already written. So you best learn how to follow the ones that are here, and your life will change. Okay. So going back to the doctor's opinion. Let's go to the bottom of the page and look at this. He says, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. Again, the doctor's making a statement here back in 1935, 1936, 1937, whenever he said that. It came out in print in 1939. But the doctor's making a statement here that in 1976 was medically proven. That's just another, I keep pounding on that because it just brings out how powerful this book really is. The doctor makes this statement, and 40 years later it becomes medically proven to be true. But he says, I do not hold with those who believe that alcohol is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months or on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorable to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. And we talked about this already. These men were not drinking to escape, they were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. Remember we talked about that last week, I think? That if you're allergic to strawberries, right, and you eat strawberries, well, once you eat strawberries, it doesn't matter how much you pray, or how much you wish, or how much willpower you muster up, you're not going to stop the hives from coming, because it's no longer a problem of the mind. You've set off something in your body that's going to have a physical reaction to it. You follow me? Does that make sense? So these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a problem beyond their mental control. Once they put it in their body, it's got nothing to do with the mind anymore. Now there's something about us that we can't handle alcohol, just like somebody allergic to chocolate or strawberries or something like that, right? No, it's an allergy. Remember we talked about the allergy last week? What's the difference between an allergy and an addiction? And that's important to understand the difference there. Okay. So there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. We talked about that too. That's killing yourself. That's suicide. The supreme sacrifice. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. So now, what he's going to give us now is 5 different types of alcoholics. You might want to make note of this. You might find yourself in 1, in 2, in 3, in 4, or all 5 of these types. So the first type he says here, there are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. There's a few of us in the rooms like that. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. What the hell's the difference between a resolution and a decision?
Decision followed by action.
A decision, well, a decision implies further action, yes. Yes, it implies further action. A resolution is a good idea. Yeah. Everybody makes a New Year's resolution, or when I'm 20, I'm going to be a millionaire, or or by next year I'm going to lose 20 pounds, whatever. It sounds like it's a good idea. But we don't do anything about it. A decision implies further action. So I make a decision to drive to New York. It's only a good idea unless I get in my car and start heading east. All right. So the second type is there's the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand to his environment. The third type of alcoholic is there's a type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. And the fourth type is the Manic-Depressive type. And he said, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then the fifth type is, then there are the types entirely normal in every respect except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They're often able, intelligent, friendly people. And I always use the analogy of, like we're up in the mountains, right? And all of us are up in the mountains, and we're in this nice cabin, and we got this beautiful fire going, right? And we're keeping us all warm, and Deb walks in, and Deb says, "Watch out, everybody! I'm going to touch this stove, and it's not going to, so you're going to get burned, Dad. Don't do it. No, it's not going to do nothing to me. And she puts her hand on the stove, scorches the shit out of her hand, and Kelly got to take her to the hospital. She gets all bandaged up. The next night, we're in the cabin. We're all having fun, a good time. The fire's burning, keeping us warm. Here comes Deb, all bandaged up in one hand. She says, watch this, everybody. Tonight, I'm going to touch the stove, and I'm not going to get burnt. I mean, Deb, come on, Deb. You know you're going to hurt you. She said, no, I'm not. And she touches the stove and burns the shit out of her hand, and Kelly takes her to the hospital. When Kelly takes her to the hospital, I go to Brad. I said, you know that, Deb? She's an able, intelligent, friendly kind of person, but when it comes to wood-burning stoves, she ain't got a damn bit of sense. Right?
But she's cute. But she's cute.
But she's cute, too, but she ain't got a damn bit of sense when it comes to wood-burning stoves. And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to alcohol and drugs, Deb ain't got a damn bit of sense. And neither do I. A 5-year-old kid got more sense than we do when it comes to that. I always, you know, I have a bunch of nieces and nephews running around, and I picture myself sitting at a gathering at home, and one of my little nephews, 5 years old, guy, come here, and take my lighter out. I like it. I see that pretty light? Touch it. He puts his finger there, he gets burnt, he cries, he runs away. The next day, I said, come here. I like the light. See that pretty light? I don't know. No, Uncle Danny. He won't do it. Because he's got more sense than we do when it comes to this. How many times have you touched the pretty light and swore this time it was going to be different? Right? So when it comes to things like that, we ain't got a damn bit of sense. And that's what the doctor's saying to us here. In all other respects, it may be normal. But when it comes to alcohol or drugs, we ain't got a damn bit of sense. Then he says here, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. The phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. Now, you can't be any more clear in the doctor's statement right there. And when we start talking about, actually, let's talk about it now, because it's so powerful. In 1976, there was a lady doctor working in the morgue in Houston, Texas. You know, she's the medical examiner, she was. And I can't remember her name, but she was working there. And when they bring in an alcoholic, a derelict or something, she was doing autopsies on them, and she started coming across something that, and she went to her superiors and asked if she can study this, because it was very interesting and very puzzling. And they gave her permission. In fact, they were bringing her corpses from great parts of Texas to Houston for her to do her studies. This is medical fact. You may not like it, you can't dispute it. It's a medical fact. You can look it up and read all about it. And what she noticed was that these alcoholics developed a little brain attached to their brain, and that they were all loaded with opium. All the alcoholics were loaded with opium. And she was wondering how these derelicts living under the bridges could afford these drugs. And through her studies and through her research, she found that what happened is that when they become a certain stage of alcoholism, that their brain, this little thing that was a growth that was a part of their brain, was when they drank alcohol, it was going there and it was turning the alcohol into synthetic morphine. And that explains why alcoholics have to have a drink, and they need detox if they've gone too far when it comes to alcohol. Very interesting, right? And from there, in her research, she proved that this disease is progressive, and she proves just what the doctor said in 1936 or 1937 whenever he said it. The phenomenon, as we suggested, may be the manifestation of allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as distinct evidence. It has never, by any treatment with which we are familiar, been permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So, over and over again, when the doctor or Bill or anybody talks about this disease, a progressive disease, she proved this stuff. She proved this stuff in 1976.
What was the doctor's name?
I can't remember her name.
Dr. G.
I don't know. But you could look it up. Houston, Texas, 1976. Doctor in the morgue, progressive disease, and she did the research and she came up with all of these things. And she proved that the alcoholism is a progressive disease. And it gets worse, never better. We wrote that in 1930-something. We printed it in 1939. She verified it in 1976. That's pretty powerful. You try writing a book and 40 years later making what you said true. All right. So he says, it has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. And then also, when we talk about entire abstinence, we're not just talking physically, we're talking mentally. Entire abstinence. I mean, I'm going to stop playing games in your head about drinking and drugging. All right, does anybody got any questions about the doctor's opinion, anything we went into so far? Yeah, that's good.
Is it possible for the psychic change to reverse if you stop following?
Good question. Everybody hear what she said? Is it possible for the psychic change to reverse if you stop following? I don't know if reverse is the correct word, but...
Or does it mean that a psychic change never happened if you relapse?
No, listen, the psychic change will happen, but what we have is a daily reprieve, okay? So it's a 24-hour program. That's what this is. So, you know, some people have been sober for 15 years and they haven't worked a step in 10 or 14 years, you know, and they're stone cold sober, you know. So I don't know if reverse is the right word, but what we have is a daily reprieve, and that reprieve is based on not my spirituality. That reprieve is based on me doing the work of my spirituality. So it's a 24-hour program and 12 steps. That's why you'll hear me meetings and somebody else share about, oh yeah, work the 3rd step, I work the 6th step. It's not a one-step program. Any problem requires 12 steps. Any situation requires 12 steps. That's why there's people in this room with lots of years of sobriety. They're not working the steps on alcohol and drugs. They've picked something that they're working the steps on, and they're going to apply the 12 steps as we go through this thing on that situation. And that's how you continuously grow spiritually. So when you stop growing spiritually, you know, it depends what you've been doing. You know, I would think I got a lot of insurance built up, but I don't want to test it. I've been doing what I've been doing, you know, over 28 years now. So, you know why? Because it works. So I have found a way out. And I don't want to, you know, test anything or, you know, see if... I don't ever think I'm cured now. We're not talking cured here. We are not talking cured. So... And I don't want to ever get to that point where I'm cured.
And even while abstinent, the disease does progress.
Yeah.
Because I stayed sober or abstinent for 5.5 years once and went back out, and I was not only as bad as I was, it got way worse.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that when we get into the next chapter too. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But yeah, so if you stop doing what you're doing, then you stop growing spiritually. And, you know, the book tells us, it warns us. It says, if we rest on our laurels, we're headed for trouble. So, I mean, if you believe this big book, and you live by what you believe in the book, the whole thing, then you don't play with that kind of stuff, you know. You just don't chance it. I'm not smart enough to come up with anything better than I found here in Alcoholism Anonymous. So, yeah, but, so I don't know if reverse is the right word. I think you just, I think here's what happens. You'll hear people in the rooms talk about, I relapsed, you know, I had 2 years, had 3 years, had 6 months, had 10 years, and I relapsed. And especially the people that, you know, had a year or something like that, younger in sobriety, I don't think relapse is the correct word. I think the correct thing for them is they just got normal again. See, I'm an alcoholic, right? So what that means is that I will drink when I don't want to drink, and I will drink till I pass out because I can't control how much I drink, right? So that's my alcoholism. So if somebody's got 6 months sober, right, and they relapse, I'm 95% chance they really didn't relapse. They just got normal. Because for 6 months it's been very abnormal for them not to drink and drug. How long have you been sober?
This time, 3 days.
3 days. All right. Okay. So these 3 days is not normal for you to not drink and drug, right? So you have to remember that. And if you, next week you're drinking, did you really relapse? Relapse from what? Relapse requires that you have a recovery going on, and then you relapse from that recovery. And relapse doesn't constitute, I've been to 95 meetings in 2 weeks, and I relapsed. That's not a relapse, that's just being normal again. So if you drink next week, you're not relapsing, you're just being normal again, because that's what you do. That's what alcoholics do, they drink. I find it amazing when people tell me about somebody that went back out and they're surprised. I'm surprised when I see somebody pick up a 10-year chip or a 1-year chip or a 20-year chip or a 30-year chip. That's fucking amazing. That drunk is not drinking 20 years. That's fucking amazing. That is truly amazing. You know? And it's just as amazing to me when I see somebody pick up a 30-day chip. You know, in fact, I used to do a lot of work on the hospitals and institutions and bringing meetings there and stuff. And I can remember, like, going with somebody, bringing them a sponsee that's got 3 months sober, and I'm 20-something years sober, and I go into the hospital, and the patient's like, how long have you been sober? My answer to that is always, when somebody asks me how long I've been sober, I tell them all day. I've been sober all day. And they say, no, well, how long? Well, if you count all the days in a row, you know, 28 years. Ah, you're full of shit. The guy with me's got 3 months. How long have you been sober? 3 months? Really? How'd you do that? Hey, you can't tell a drunk you've been sober 28 years. They don't want to hear what you got to say. But the guy with 3 months, he has found something that they need.
And it seems so much more attainable.
Not only does it seem attainable, but what is it? We already talked about it tonight. You can relate. You can't relate to somebody who's 28 years sober when you're dying in a friggin' treatment facility with, you know, 2 days. That's just not, it's just something you can't relate to. But the guy that's got 3 months, you can relate to him suffering these last 3 months not taking a drink. How the hell did you do it? They want to know, how'd you do it? They don't care how I did it because they don't believe me anyway.
But that has depth and weight. That's what you're saying.
What I'm saying, in that situation, the 3 months has depth and weight.
Yeah.
Not the 28 years.
Right.
The 28 years is full of shit. 3 months is depth and weight. Or, you know, it's 30 years or 35 years, whatever it is, they don't believe us. You know. And some of them might believe us, but the majority of people, they don't really, it's not impressive to them.
You can't comprehend it.
They can't comprehend it. That's why it's not impressive to them. But 3 months? My Lord, how'd you do that? Can you help me? They'll ask in 3 months, can you sponsor me? They don't want me to sponsor them because they don't believe it. So any other questions on the doctor's opinion? All right, so at the bottom of the next to last page of the doctor's opinion, he's talking about a guy that gives him a mental uplift, and then he says, his alcoholic problem was so complex, and his depression was so great, that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. We doubted if even that would have any effect. What's moral psychology? Anybody know? Right?
Living in the agreement with a particular system or set of principles or standards regarding right or wrong conduct.
Wow.
You look at that, yeah,
Wow.
Attaboy.
Yeah. It's,
Like a dictionary.
in our lingo, it's kind of just truthful talking. Really. All he just said equals to about truthful talking.
Right.
That's what it is, moral psychology. Just me and you just talking honestly with each other. You know, one drunk to another. So then he says, however, he did become sold, in parentheses, on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. So he became sold on the ideas contained in this book. Sold on the ideas contained in this book. What we're really talking about here is you buying into this thing, where it's yours and you own it. And you really own it. And you learn how to chase recovery the way you chase that shit out there. When you get honest with yourself about what's happening in your life, and you do this deal. Hold on, phone call. So, if you become sold on this idea, then you own it. And if it's yours and you're a real alcoholic, and it's yours, you don't want to give nothing to nobody else. You don't want to give up what's yours. Right? He says, then I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through. So right here knocks away one of the biggest things you hear in the rooms all the time is the first 164 pages. There's nowhere in this book that it tells us to read the first 164 pages. The doctor is suggesting in this, to end this paragraph, that we read the entire book. Because the whole second half of the big book is about step 2. And as we get into step 2, you'll see what it says about the stories. And it clearly explains that all the stories are about step 2. So the suggestion is, and it's not even a light suggestion. He says, I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through. The entire book. Read all the stories. Don't stop at page 164. Go on to the next page. And the stories you can read. The first 164 pages you can study, and the rest of the book you can read. But you'll find yourself in there. You'll find yourself in there, and when you find yourself in there, you'll be able to help somebody else. As you find yourself through the process of working the steps, the more you find yourself through the steps, the more able you are to help somebody else. And that's the altruistic movement that we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you really want this deal, it's not a question of, some people make me laugh. I don't know, I don't really sponsor people. It's like it's a suggestion. It's a friggin' 12th step. It's not a suggestion. It's something you must do. So if you want to do it, then do it right. And if you want to do it right, understand the book. And that's what we're doing in here. And that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you. And I think I lost all you guys there in